And yeah, we're live. Thank you for joining me.
For sure, man. Thanks for having me.
It's good. Yeah, it's like 5 in the morning now where I am. What time is it where you are?
It's about 10 in the morning. Yeah,
Oh, well,
19 hours is a weird it's a weird time frame to try and figure out mathematically. So yeah,
yeah. So over there, that means it's 10 in the morning Sunday, correct?
Sunday. Yeah, you're a
Yeah,
Monday, right?
yeah. Monday, five in the
Cool.
morning. So
Wow. Okay. Well, thank you
yeah, that's
for
okay.
being up at 5 in the morning.
Yeah. Nah. Yeah. So the first question I want to ask you is, how did you get your name, Ill Poetic? Where did it come from?
Me, it was a name I chose in high school. I had I had a few unsuccessful names before that, my little rap names. And yeah, at the time I picked it, it was probably the late 90s. And ill was a word that was still, like you're an ill MC. This is probably like in the era of like this like late 90s super lyricist boom of like Cannabis, Big Pun, Razcast, Chino XL, and every MC was just like ill. So there was ill there. And then poetic, I always just kind of leaned, my writing leans more with the poetry slant as well. So I was like, oh, it's like I'm ill like an MC, but poetic like a poet. And that's about as deep as it went. And 20, 22 years later, I'm just like, I don't know. I have a love-hate relationship with the name. it's it's
Yeah.
definitely
Well,
marked for its time.
yeah. Well, you have guys like Ill Logic, Ill.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. So yeah, a lot of people. Ill.
Yeah, no, we got grouped in a lot. Like when we worked on we worked on a record together about 10 years ago, and there was definitely about every ill pun that you could come up with for like press and just people in general. Like, hey, ill logic, ill poetic, and we're like, yeah, man, it's crazy. But no, it's cool though.
Yeah. Well, it worked out really well because like I've heard his earlier records where you feature on it a lot, and yeah, it goes really hard.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, appreciate that, man, very much.
Yeah. All right. So the name's out of the way. So how did you get started in hip hop or in music in general? Who were your idols? Who were the people that you looked up to in the industry the most?
Um, well, I'll try and kind of fast forward quickly, but I initially started writing in when I was probably about 8 years old. So my initial influences actually were Criss Cross and Ice Cube, which is a pretty interesting juxtaposition. Um, as far at that point, I don't know if I was really looking up to anybody from it. I don't even know if I knew what an industry was. I was just kind of writing like the kids that were like Criss Cross or whatever. As I started getting really, I think, a little bit more serious about stepping into hip hop and like, producing and singing, whatever, getting into the local scene. Um, I looked up to just a lot of I'm from Dayton, Ohio originally. So I looked up to a lot of the Dayton, Ohio hip hop artists, folks that kind of took us under their wing. Um, and then that kind of branched out into, they got me hip to a lot of the underground Ohio and I just a lot of that, like it starts with like Illogic and Blueprint and Greenhouse Effect and folks you're familiar with, and then that moves into learning about like Atmosphere at the time and Cannibal Ox and Def Jux and Rhyme Sayers and things like that. So that I was influenced by a lot of different hip hop and music, but I think that was the most touchable. Like they were within reach. I could appreciate their hustle. I could watch them at Scribble Jam selling vinyl and say like, I want to get to that point, like I want to be on that stage. They're right there. Like I want to get to that point. So they were all definitely huge influences early on, I think.
All right. Cool. So, all right. So, obviously, fast forwarding a few years, now you have the album "An Idiot's Guide to Anarchy," which
Yeah,
was an
yeah.
album that was recommended to me by Hunter Prey. When I talked to
Oh,
him,
cool.
he said, "Oh, you have to check out that album specifically." And he called it amazing in the interview. And so I was like, "Cool, I have to check it out." So as soon as that interview finished, I checked it out, and yeah, I have tons of questions. I'm very interested. But before I ask them, what was your
Yeah.
mindset behind making that album?
Man, well, It took 10 years to make. So a lot of shifting mindsets in that 10 years. I started writing the record I released an album back in 2007 called The World Is Ours, and I toured that record. I got to go to Europe, and I remember writing some of my first lyrics while out on tour in Europe, and that was just kind of the beginning. I think over that 10 years, though, the foundation of my mindset was I really wanted to make something different. As a producer, as an MC, you know, my 2007 record was successful as an underground hip hop record. It was the most successful thing I'd ever released. And I'd started making records for the new album, and I kind of had two piles of beats I was making. One pile of beats was records that I thought should fit on the next project, you know, like it sounded like the next logical step. The other pile of beats were just these weird beats I was making, and I didn't know what they were, but I found myself intrigued and challenged by them, you know, where I'm like, yo, I don't know what this is, but this is what I go to bed thinking about. The other beats sound like I'm trying to remake my old shit, you know? And so I just started looking at it like this corridor, man. Like I didn't want to make a record that sounded like a Jay Dilla record, a Pete Rock record, a Premier record, you know, just whatever. I'm like, I want to make something that is totally solely me and mine, and I have to travel down so many, you know, if you were to enter a house, you would have to go through so many different hallways and rooms and plow through walls just to get into the room that I created for the sound of this record. And that's really all I wanted. So I threw everything in the kitchen sink at it, all my musical influences, everything I could possibly learn. I just tried to go to the max with song concepts, writing, production, the mixing, the mastering, the artwork, the rollout. I just wanted it all to feel like this very unique thing that only no one could duplicate, you know? And I think that was one of my biggest mind states, you know, through the whole process.
Yeah. So yeah, because when I was listening to it, because I listened over it about 3 or 4 times, and a few things stuck out to me because when I was listening to it, the impression that I got was, this might sound weird, but it sounded like the concept of it sounded like it was a world within, like you're working with an AI kind of. It's because the woman voice, the robot technological voice that pops up.
Yeah.
Sounds like you're kind of collaborating with like an AI VR
so cool.
universe. That's what it sounds like to me.
No, that's super dope, man. I don't even know if I had thought of it to that. I can definitely see that. It's probably not far off. There was definitely the feeling, the overall, I think, theme, and even like the meaning of the title, "An Idiot's Guide to Anarchy." Like in the title, I'm the idiot. You know, like it's kind of self-deprecating, but the whole point is that there's this crazy world that you're kind of born into, and like school teaches you one way to approach it, and you know, adults tell you what life is about, but you really don't know until you just jump out there. And when you jump out there, you realize like there's really no rules out here for me. Like there's laws, there's rules that we need to follow from a society level, but like it's going to be up to me to determine how to succeed and fulfill my dreams and what I want to go out there and do. And so a lot of the other voices in that record, I don't even necessarily know what they represented completely, but they were definitely just supposed to represent voices within that universe, you know, like guiding light. Like there's kind of this poem piece that this girl spits near the end of the record, and that's kind of like this guiding light, spiritual voice, you know. So yeah, they all definitely had their own characters attached to them for sure.
Yeah, because like to me it was like kind of a AI's view on social, like on the social world, because you know, because you have those little poems like you said about God starting with nothing and then creating something, which sounded kind of like, you know, like an AI version of the beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah, but then you have tracks as well about drinking bleach, which I was like, what is this album meant to be about? Like, is it an AI standpoint of the world and the anarchy within, or is it something deeper? Like, I wasn't sure because I wasn't sure about the meanings of these.
No, it's cool. So I hadn't I hadn't thought about it from an AI approach. It's really interesting to think of it like that. I'd have to revisit the album now with that lens, Like, see, and it's been a minute since I've actually listened to the record. But I think the whole purpose of the record, and so there are these songs within the record. So you mentioned Bleach, and Bleach to me is kind of one of the high points of chaos. So it's like this. If you picture a kid being born into chaos, being born into the world, no matter where you're born, there's chaos kind of happening all around you as a child, right? So you travel through these songs, and you hit these. There are these two songs in particular, 844 and Bleach. They're closer to the earlier half of the record, but they're kind of near the midpoint. And those are kind of like the zenith of chaos, like if you imagine a kid looking around at all the craziness around, and at the time it's like you're seeing, like 844 was about 9/11, like you're seeing planes crash into buildings, you're seeing people dancing in the street in ashes with cell phones out, and there's this weird dystopian kind of vibe. And Bleach is kind of like in that dystopia. It's like this. When I wrote it, the whole point was there. It was like reality TV, especially, was super super popping. Where there were some women on there who were like shouting at each other, and one woman told another woman to drink bleach, and it's hilarious. And there was that happened in real life. Like, my friend was out with a girl at a club, and she told this other girl to drink bleach and die. And I just thought that was hilarious because it was such a creative way to tell somebody off. Like, man, who would tell somebody to drink bleach and die? It's just so graphic, And I thought about like juxtaposing, like, man, how would it sound if you had it more sounding like Showtimey? Like, bop, ba da bop, but drink bleach, bitch. It's just so weird, And so it was just funny to me. And I was like, well, what if you put like 808s under it and made it like some 808, like some Miami based 2 Live Crew booty bounce type, like doom doom doom, bop ba da bop, but drink bleach, bitch. And it's just this weird juxtaposition of craziness, because that's kind of how it all feels. Like, it's not supposed to all 100% make sense, but it's supposed to just give you that feeling of that newborn looking at chaos all around, or like you said, an AI kind of experiencing chaos. And that's kind of the end of the chaos. Like, as soon as Bleach ends, everything kind of drops off, and the music gets a little bit more chill. And it's kind of what happens when you reach that that zenith of chaos in life, when you're just getting overwhelmed with inputs all coming in. You kind of have that moment where you're like, shut everything out, relax, chill, and then it drops you into that more reflective internal zone. So that's kind of what that area is about. I don't know if that makes any sense at all.
It was really good. They gave me the explanation, because when I was listening to it, I couldn't help but laugh. I was like, when I was in that song and that chorus, and I was like, what could this possibly be about? Like, and then I was like I said, the only thing that went through my head was, an AI looking at the world and seeing anarchy. That's the only thing I can think of. But no, it's a very good explanation.
Yeah, and the AI is a really that makes sense. Like, the way that you took it in is really unique. I hadn't come across your interpretation of it, but your interpretation actually it makes me want to go back and listen to the record through your ears, and I'm like, oh wow, this makes sense. That it is very similar though. So yeah.
Yeah, and another track that really stood out to me and made me laugh, like that was a dope track, but it made me laugh, is the Ride song, the Get Out of My Car, which I found really really interesting, because the first verse you're like, oh, get out of my car. Well, actually, it's your car, but for the song, it's my car. Like,
yeah.
So So what was the reason? What was the story behind that?
All right, so I originally had that song concept years back. It had nothing to do with me personally. Me and my friends, Hunter was there actually. Me and Hunter Prey and a couple other friends. We were hanging outside of our college dorm like 2 a.m, and we saw this. we saw this dude get kicked out of, like his girl kicked him out of the car at like 2 a.m. And it was funny for us at the time, just watching it happen in front of like a Taco Bell, and he just took it and he just walked the other way down the middle of the road. And we were just like laughing. It really probably wasn't cool, but we were idiots. So, but we're laughing about it. And that idea always stuck with me, like this get out my car. I just had this hook sitting in my head of like a singer singing about that experience. I had written a verse for it, or a couple verses that were cool. But they didn't really add much to it to me. I was always just ambivalent about them. And then my, about 9 years my wife and I have been together now, but around the time my wife and I first met, and, we were prone to argue more, and, cause that's just what happens in the beginning of a relationship. We just had a very contentious driving relationship. And I just waited until I was pissed at her about something, and I wrote a verse, frustrated, and it's just kind of a tongue-in-cheek verse, because it's like I'm mad. The whole purpose is like, as mad as I am, I'm still gonna end up being with you. Like I still love you, so I'm really frustrated that I love you enough to be this mad at you, and still, even in my verse, I can't help but still end up loving you, kind of begrudgingly, like gritting my teeth, loving you, like. And so then it became funny to me. I was like, this is hilarious. So yeah.
Throughout the whole album, I noticed, obviously themes of anarchy, themes of what I perceive to be AI, and themes of funny tongue-in-cheek moments. So I think for the whole album, it was a really interesting, interesting experience from start to finish, having all these elements.
Thanks, man. No, I appreciate that. I appreciate you picked up on those things. That's really cool.
And also, the past few days, I've been listening to the album that came out this year, the instrumental album, Instinctively Drowning.
Oh, yeah.
I've been listening to that a bit just to see where your mind's at since, because I use YouTube Music, and it comes up with the album The Idiot's Guide to Anarchy, and then straight after Instinctive Drowning. Nothing in between.
Interesting.
So is this the next project you dropped since Anarchy?